Welcome back. In this episode, I'm going to take you through the next step of creating your portrait, and that's making the profile. If you get your profile right at the beginning, then you're off to a really strong start. I always like to think of the profile as like a map that you build your face around. You know, if I'm feeling lost at any point in the sculpting process, later on, at any point, I go back to the profile and I really work on getting that accurate, and then I know I've got somewhere to hang my hat on and know that that is correct. Some of you may have noticed in my previous videos that I've shared online that when I'm sculpting celebrities for wax museums, then I use a method where I cut out the profile and then I grid up the front picture, and I use that, and it just speeds things up, and it's kind of a shortcut to getting an accurate likeness. But it's not how I learnt, and I really can't stress this enough. I don't think it's the best way to learn. And also, you know, you can't apply it to very small sizes. The aim of this course is to help you to learn to trust your own eye. If you trust your own judgment, that's absolutely invaluable. And if you stretch yourself to learn the hard way, then you will be a better sculptor as a result of it. The grid technique is very technical and I wouldn't recommend it for beginners, but because people have been so interested in it over the years, I did make a long, very detailed course on it called Building Blocks, and you can find that on my teaching website sculptingmasterclass.com. And in that course I show you how to make a life-size front-on, how to size it, how to grid it up and line it up with your profile accurately, and then how to make your profile and how to work with it effectively. If you're just beginning, I would always recommend taking strong foundations. That's suitable for anybody, and that's the technique that I'll be teaching in this course. But if you are interested in the gridded technique, that is very popular with more professional sculptors. So I've sold a lot of them to creature effects guys or people that sculpt public statues and need to get a good likeness, and also a lot of digital sculptors in the gaming industry really enjoy learning that grid method because it's very, very accurate and very technical. Now, because I know that some of you will want to have a go at the grid and cutout profile method, I have included in the reference pack of Mark a front-on and two profiles, and they're all sized so that if you print it off on an A4 piece of paper and make sure that this ruler is measuring right, then that's going to be an accurate 75% front and profile for you. But I must say, please don't do this if you haven't taken the Building Blocks course, because measuring from photos, if you don't know what you're doing, you can end up getting things very, very wrong. So, word of warning, but they are in the reference pack. Back to this demo. Now, in these early stages, I do quite a lot of measuring, and that's to get the big proportions working. And it can seem like, oh dear, there's lots of measuring, it's all really technical, but don't worry, because once you get further on down the line, there won't be really hardly any measuring. You might want to check occasionally, but if you get these big measurements working at the beginning, then that gives you the freedom a bit later to not worry too much about it. So some of you may not have seen these before. This is a pair of calipers, and these are used for measuring three-dimensional objects. And in sculpture, we use them to measure anatomical points on the face. You may not be familiar with measuring a head, and it's quite a technical thing again. And if you're interested in understanding what those anatomical points are on a head and how to measure a model, then I cover all this in enormous detail in my course, Strong Foundations. I will be measuring Mark's head using this measurement chart, and this is also going to be included in the reference pack on the website for you to purchase, along with all the photos of Mark, so you've got everything you need to sculpt him. So this is a measurement chart where I've taken all his measurements at life size, and then I've calculated them to be 75%, which is the right size for a 3/4 scale head. Of course, you might decide that you want to sculpt your head at a different size. You might want to go a bit smaller. You could sculpt your head at half life size. You just need to adjust the calculations. Or you might even want to go a little bit smaller and sculpt it at a 1/3 scale, like these two little heads here.
My name is Michael Caine and I am Christian Bale.
But if you are going to sculpt them this small, I would recommend using an oil-based clay, because water-based clay dries out too quickly if you go too small. However you decide to sculpt, Mark, it's entirely up to you. I'm just giving you the raw materials and then you can sculpt in whatever size and whatever style you like. That's all part of the creative process and it's all part of being an artist. Okay, so my first stage of building my profile is just to start looking at my general shape of the head in relation to the armature. So I'm going to take my first measurement and it's the top of the head to the chin. I'm just going to mark it on here like that. So it's a clear mark there, and I know that it's going to be out here somewhere, so I'm just going to start building it up a bit above there. So really just squidging it on along that central bit. I'm literally just very roughly thinking about where the face is going to be in relation to the neck and everything. So it's a good idea to do it from both sides so it's all nice and strongly squidged on. Again, I'm just using the heel of my hand to just really squidge it on there and just doing it along that central line. Now you might notice that everything is very wonky in here. It's because I'm filming this in a space with a very wonky floor, so if you notice that the central line sometimes isn't very straight, that's why. I'm just going to check that now, and I can see I've got that top of the head to the chin projection looking about right, and I'm just going to see if it's about the right distance back to the neck, and then after that I'll be looking at the photos of Mark and start actually trying to make it look a little bit like him. I know where my chin is roughly now, so now I'm just going to turn it to the front and just fill out the sides a little bit, just so that you don't end up with a big thin pancake. This is a three-dimensional thing after all, so I'm just going to smear it on a bit, both sides. Just the very beginnings of that upside down egg shape that all us heads are underneath. Okay, great, so that's a really good starting point. And now it's time to actually look at my photos of Mark. So I'm going to be looking at my two profile pictures that are obviously in the reference pack, 11A and 11B. And I'm going to stand back and just kind of look at the shape of his head. And at this stage, I'm just going to look at the back of the shape of his head a bit and just get that top of the head shape and the back of the head just a little bit at this stage before I move on to looking at the forehead. So I'm standing back and I'm just looking at my photo, looking at him. So I can see it just needs to be a little bit more round on the top there. So just getting a simple wooden tool there and just rounding it off a bit. This is all just very, very generic at the moment. It's just to get a nice solid shape to build my actual profile onto. Next, I'm going to look at the relationship between his forehead and his chin, and this relates to what I was talking about with head position. So depending on how far your head is tipped back, then that affects where your forehead is compared to your chin. Now, because Mark is leaning forwards, then I'm guessing his forehead's going to be further forwards in space and his chin is going to be tucked in. But I'm going to look at the photo and just check that. And yes, I can see that forehead is definitely further forward a bit than his chin there. So I'm just going to stand back, look at his forehead and just build it out a little bit. And I'm looking at that relationship and I want to make sure that if my chin's there, then my forehead's a bit further out. Just getting that general relationship right. You know, while I'm sculpting my forehead, I'm just thinking about the difference between male and female foreheads. And it's a generalised rule because obviously everybody's different, but men often have a heavier brow area on their skull, and that makes them have a much more leaning forward forehead. In fact, I can show you on Carlos that I sculpted recently for my recent course, The Sculptor's Notebook. I'll just get him. When I'm talking about the brow of the skull, I'm talking about this area here. You have this sort of bony M shape, and on a man that tends to be a little bit more projected and heavy. So that would be this area on Carlos's face. And you can see it's quite bulky even from the front, but then if I turn it to the side, you can see because it is quite heavy there on the brow, it gives his forehead that sloping direction. And then if you compare Carlos to Layla, and Layla is the model from the Strong Foundations course, you can see she's got a much lighter brow area. And then if I turn it to the side again, you can see that makes her forehead more kind of vertical with that lovely curve at the top. And here they are together. Don't they make a lovely couple? I wonder if I've sculpted any famous people that would be a good illustration of these facts. Well, there's Leonardo DiCaprio. He's got a really heavy brow. And then someone with a lovely vertical rounded forehead. Who would that be? Rihanna. That's a very good example. Back to my sculpture of Mark then. I feel like I've made really good progress with the profile. I know where the shape of my head is. I've started blocking in the top of the head and the back of the head, and I know where my chin is. So I'm going to just take one more measurement and I'm going to mark that on the clay. So that's going to be there. And I will redraw that centre line on as well, because it's a really good idea to keep that going all the time. Oh, what's that? Seems to be my question hotline. Hello? Speaking. Oh, hello, Fernando. Oh, excellent question. Thank you very much. Well, I've just had my first question in, and they want to know how I keep my clay wet. As I've said before, I always work with water-based clay. So that means that it is actually made of water. So in order to keep it wet, you do need to spray it from time to time. So I just use an ordinary plant spray that you can get in any sort of DIY or hardware shop. Fill it with water, and then every now and again you just literally spray it down. If you don't ever spray it, it will just dry out and crack. So you do need to keep your clay fairly wet. As the sculpting process goes on, it will start off very wet, and then as you get more and more close to it being finished, you'll notice it does harden a bit, and you want it to be a bit hard to model those final forms. But you do need to get some water on it from time to time. So once you've sprayed it, it's wet for a while, obviously, and then you can carry on working on it. But when you've finished working on it every day, you do need to then wrap it up to stop it totally drying out. So if your clay is very wet, I would say just give it a spray and then put on a bag. So I just use an ordinary dustbin bag like this and put it on, and then tie it around the bottom, and you can leave that now until you come back to work on it again. Now later on, when it's getting a little bit close to being finished, but you still want it to soak up a bit of moisture, you can actually use a wet rag on it. But if you put a wet rag straight onto the clay, it'll soak up all that moisture and it'll become really wet again, and you'll lose some of the detail that you've spent ages sculpting. So what I tend to do is I just get a couple of bits of aluminium armature wire like this and just put it on like that to keep the cloth away from the surface. Thanks, Sylvester. And then get a wet cotton rag wrap it up, and you see the armature wire stops it touching the face. So just put it on like that. Get a plastic bag and tie it round the bottom. And that'll just keep all the moisture in and hopefully make it soak up a little bit of water as well, so it doesn't totally dry out. And that's the end of this episode of Sculpting at Home. And in the next episode, I will be building out his profile and showing you how to do that. If you have any questions for me, please just put them in the comments section below, and I will get Fernando to phone one through to me at the end of each episode. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you have, please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our further episodes. And if you can't wait to get sculpting, then please do head on over to Sculpting Masterclass, where you can download the reference pack of Mark or try one of our many other sculpting courses.